20 seconds. 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunskyMysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Well, good evening, everybody. Bill Xam here. Welcome to our weekly Tuesday night interview show. We're so happy to see so many of you here with us. And if you are watching on the YouTube channel after this gets uploaded to YouTube, we thank you for watching. You will be greatly rewarded tonight. Tonight, our special guest is a gentleman who has written a book. The name of the book is What About the Boy? A Father's Pledge to His Disabled Son. I began reading this book about a week ago, and it is very very stressful to read at times because it concerns a relatively sad story, but it has its ups and downs. And I would say that, first of all, being a parent is not an easy job, as I suspect most of you already know. It's a lot of work. Now, what would you do if your child, your first child, wasn't normal? What would you do? What would you be prepared to do for your child? Well, tonight we are going to meet somebody who came into that situation. His name is Steve Gallup, and he is on the line right now. Steve, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for having me on, Bill.
Yes. It has been, I was telling Steve before the show that it's been a roller coaster ride for me reading this book. It was a book, I mean, simply because I'm just a sensitive kind of a guy. It was a book that I could only read a chapter or two at a time, and I'd have to walk away from it to decompress for a while, because the way you wrote it, Steve, it grabs the reader and it sucks you into your life and to your family. Is that what you intended from the beginning, that it would have that type of an effect on the reader?
I would say that if you are experiencing that the book is a success because, well, let me tell you, I wrote this over a great long period of time, and towards the end I participated in a critique group with other writers, and a lot of people who read the manuscript said I was too removed, because I'm sort of a technical sort of person. I approached my problems in a scientific way, I thought. I tried to be rational. And they said, there's not enough emotion here. So if I managed to put enough emotion in to have that effect on you, then I guess I did what I was supposed to do.
And for those of you on the video side, I have just brought up a picture of our guest. Substantially older than the photographs that are in the book, because apparently the first part of the book and the childhood of your son was...
No, that was in the 1980s.
That was in the 1980s. His name is Joseph, and how soon after he was born did you realize that there was an issue with him?
Well, let's see. I guess it was, well, the hospital spotted something pretty quickly because they wouldn't let us take him home.
Mm-hmm.
they said that they said he had an irritable cry, which is a term that apparently had some significance for them. He was spitting up a lot. He wasn't able to keep his food down. They said they just wanted to keep him for a couple weeks for observation. And just to be on the safe side, they gave him an IV of an antibiotic. So he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And to be honest with you, I guess a lot of people would have been stressed out by that, but we thought that was okay. I in particular did, because I felt so inadequate to the task of raising a child. I didn't think I had any smarts at all when it came to being a father, and I thought the longer he's in the hands of these experts, the better. Be that as it may, they never found, well, they did find a structural anomaly with his brain with a CAT scan, but they didn't say that necessarily meant anything. And they sent him home with us, and within a very few weeks, he was crying all the time and writhing about, thrashing about, and continuing to not keep his food down. So we were aware almost from the get-go that something was wrong, but we didn't have a name for it.
And folks, I have a suggestion for everybody that's listening and watching to this. You need to read this book, because frankly, I don't think one set of parents in a million would go through what Steve and his wife did in raising and helping Joseph. I've read the book, so I'm trying not to give too much away to the audience, but it seems like you decided, both you and your wife, Judy was her name, is that correct?
Yeah, Judy, yes.
You both decided pretty early on that you're going to do whatever it takes to help Joseph.
Well, you say one in a million, but there are an awful lot of kids with problems out there, and the vast majority of the parents that I've run across have been equally determined. So there are an awful lot out there who are willing to move heaven and earth to do anything they can to help their kids.
That is good news. I actually have a friend where I work during my day job, and this person has a challenged son, and he's never going to be on his own, and she does everything she can for him, and she has done a wonderful job with him also. How did you relate to the audience how the steps that you guys went through with the physical therapy and the health system, the medical system, and what led you to consider an alternative to the traditional ways of medicine to helping Joseph to try to overcome his issues?
Well, let me say, I guess at the outset, I'm not here to promote any particular alternative therapy. We came to the choices we made by what seemed to be the best rational choice at the time, but it's not necessarily. It's not. I think someone reading the story would not necessarily see that we made the right choices all the time. I don't regret my choices on the basis of what I knew at the time. But be that as it may, if you have a child who's got an urgent problem, and there was no question in my mind, our son had an urgent problem. You want to go to the doctor, of course, but if the doctors aren't going to do anything, and then that's the case that we ran into, then they should not be surprised if parents are willing to go somewhere else.
And
it's not.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, it's not just limited to dealing with a disabled child. It could be anything. Whatever the patient is alarmed about. If the patient feels that the physician is not taking his concerns seriously, then that person is going to go somewhere else, and they may go to someone who's going to give them what they need. They may go to a quack, and it's just not good medicine to send them off that way.
I have to ask, I've been planning on asking you this. How do you feel at this point, given how many years have passed and everything, how do you feel about how the mainstream medical community is going about treating disabled kids?
There are some good people out there, but there are some, alas, a large number, I think, who have still not progressed from what it was like in the 1980s. What has changed is we have the internet now.
Mm-hmm.
Back when my son was little, my wife and I had the doctors, and we had the public library, which was woefully out of date and inadequate, and that was about it. The doctors didn't want to tell us anything that was outside their particular sphere. One physician, I remember Judy said, there's got to be something we can do. And she said, well, there are programs out there for children like yours, but I'm not going to talk about them. And Judy said, well, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to get information? And the doctor said, oh, talk to other parents. So, and I suppose her reasoning was she didn't want to be blamed for any choices we made. If we went to something that was alternative and we said, well, this doctor mentioned that, then she would get in trouble with her peers or something. So we're on our own. And it's up to us to make the wise decisions or not.
Do you think the medical professionals, and this kind of goes out of the scope of the book a little bit, do you think the medical professionals are afraid of the legal consequences if they send you someplace, make a suggestion, and it doesn't work out?
It could be legal, or it could just be their own professional reputation. It opens up a can of worms when you, well, first of all, in the case of almost any developmental disability, the available treatments are almost uniformly not covered by insurance. They're almost uniformly controversial, and there are exceptions perhaps, but I mean, if you do get insurance coverage, it's a battle. And the doctor who sends you on to something like that is going to complicate his life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they want that. I was giving a talk to a group of parents of disabled kids a while back, and this subject came up, and there was a father in the crowd who was a doctor himself, and he said, one reason doctors don't want to even tell you there's a problem with your child is then they'd be required to do something. And they don't know what to do. They've got a waiting room full of people out there. They have other things on their plate.
That is...
It sounds rough.
That is sad. That is...
Well, it's not an indictment of everybody. As I say, there are some good ones. But you got to find the good ones, you know.
Yeah. I will say this from personal experience. I have had both good doctors and I've had bad doctors. And the internist that I have now, he's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He is a absolutely splendid doctor, and he will help you find alternatives to mainstream medication and medicines. He's more than willing to go out on a limb a little bit for his patients.
Wonderful.
So I have to believe, given the time frame back in the 1980s, that probably had a lot to do with it, because everybody was so freaking lawsuit happy back then. I mean, they would
maybe they still are. I don't really know. I guess.
Yeah.
It's still a risk.
Yes, I imagine it still is a risk. When I first started getting ready for the show, I had no idea what questions to ask you. So I think we should start probably at the beginning, because one thing that I found absolutely fascinating, and it really warmed my heart, I think it was one of the best parts of the book. When you first started doing what is called patterning, and you lived in your condominium, and you made a sign that requested help. Tell us about that.
Actually, it was a letter. Well, maybe there was a sign too, but we wrote a letter and made a bunch of copies, and we actually mailed it. There were about 260 units in that condominium complex, and we mailed it to everybody. And we didn't really know what to expect, but you see, we needed a third person to help us with this particular kind of therapy. The two of us couldn't do it just ourselves. And we didn't have any relatives. I mean, we did. But our relatives were on the other side of the country. We had recently moved to San Diego from Virginia. And we hadn't had time to make a lot of friends before this happened. So we just had to add some people. And we mailed this thing out, and we had a terrific response. One lady opened up her mailbox, read the letter standing out there in the street, and walked straight to our house and said, "Tell me what to do." And these people became like family to us. Some of them I'm still in touch with all these years later.
Wow, that is a great thing. On the screen right now, one of the images in the book is you, much younger, I might add, holding up one of the word signs for Joseph for him to look at. And I suppose this goes along with the patterning. Explain to the listeners and to the viewers exactly what the patterning and the word cards are all about, because I mean, presumably not everybody that's watching is going to buy the book, and they may come across this type of situation in their own lives. As well, they may have a child at some point that needs this type of help. So go through the process of this, the patterning exercises and the word cards.
Okay, let me see what I can do with that. It's very complicated, and the book does go into some detail in regards to the rationale and how we did these things. And I didn't want to make it a how-to book for how to do this particular therapy, because I don't necessarily think it's what everybody needs. But I had to give some details, because otherwise nobody would understand what we were doing. So we had been directed by a chiropractor, actually, because my wife thought our son was in pain, and she took him to a chiropractor who said, yes, he is in pain. Can't help him entirely. You should read this book called Teach Your Baby to Read by Glenn Doman. And my wife says, well, golly, I'm sure teaching a kid to read is all very well, but I don't think that's what we need to be dealing with. And she said, just read the book. So we got the book, read it, and I found out that the guy who wrote it had a place in Philadelphia where they not only teach kids to read, but they work with kids who have brain injuries. And part of the therapy is teaching them to read, because that causes brain growth. It's also very motivating. When someone who's having trouble accomplishing something is suddenly able to do things or learn new things, then that motivates them to try to do other things. And learning to read is quite easy for a child, because basically it's like hearing, except you hear words and you understand them. That's using your ears. Reading, you're just using a different organ. You're using your eyes, but it's the same kind of input. So by showing him a word, if you take it at a very basic level, you could show him a spoon, an actual physical device, and hold up the word spoon. Or you could show him a picture or something and have the word to it. And you just have an enormous number of words. We would say, 5 or 7 words at a time, with one after the other, and then stop and do that several times per day. And after a few days, retire those words and get new words, and constantly stimulate him with new information. And he got to where he could recognize these words and choose between them correctly, and he liked it.
The first time that he recognized a word, it came across in the book as a absolutely wonderful moment for you.
Well, it was a surprise, because we weren't testing him at home. We had been advised not to test him. But when we went back to the clinic to get an assessment of our progress, they said, all right, let's just take 2 words and hold them up. And we held up, I think just randomly, we got two words. One was chicken and one was duck. And we held one and then the other, and we said, which word says duck? And he looked at the word that said chicken, and we thought, oh gosh, he's getting it wrong. But then he said chi, and then he looked at the other one and he said duck. And he was very proud of himself. And this is a kid who doesn't really talk. So, I mean, it was a big moment.
Yeah, I mean, as a parent, this has got to be not only startling, but it has to be very gratifying.
Extraordinarily gratifying, because the program was extraordinarily difficult. And to find out that it's actually accomplishing something is wonderful.
Yes. You said earlier that you weren't evangelizing or advertising any one particular methodology or anything like that. And I got to the point where you started talking about the clinic in Pennsylvania, and I thought, oh no, this is going to turn into a great big advertisement. But I was wrong. I wanted to make sure I made that clear. I was wrong about that.
It might have been that if everything had just gone hunky-dory, but we were with them for more than 4 years, and during that time we had opportunity to butt heads with them and to see reasons why they were a little bit on the dogmatic side, more than a little bit perhaps would be a more accurate statement.
That came through.
In fact, you might call it a cult. So I would not be doing an honest treatment of the story if I did not show all sides of the experience.
Yes, I didn't want to bring up the C word because it also struck me as that, but it seems like the Institute is doing extremely valuable work. Are they still in existence, or are they still doing the same
work? They have a
work?
website. It's the Institute for the Achievement of Human Potential. At the time we were there, they had a number of imitation outfits around the country who do something similar. Of course, they always said that these were imitators, that they had a watered-down process that wasn't as good. So there's competition. I presume the imitators are still in business as well, but certainly the Institute is.
And the process actually works.
Well, I won't say it works for everybody. It helped us. It didn't take us all the way to wellness. Total wellness was held up as the goal. And I do believe in swinging for the fences. Let me make that point. I think, when you've got a challenge like this, it's a wonderful thing to embrace it and, see what you can accomplish. It's mentally satisfying. That's the upside of the whole thing. But there's a downside too, and it can be exhausting. You can find yourself alienated from the rest of the world, and then you have to dig yourself out of that hole when you realize it.
How were you? I think it comes through in the book. How were you and Judy able to cope with the alienation? Now, you had that good support group of people that were helping you with the exercises, but as far as the rest of it goes, how did your relationships recover, and which ones suffered?
Well, I suppose there were people who were friends before this all started who dropped out of our lives completely. Family members who were not fully on board with us just did not stay close during the time that this was going on, but we have since recovered, and we're in touch, and we're friends now. I suppose the worst thing about the alienation was just we were, when you are listening to one source for your information, and that source tells you that everybody else is out to lunch. To the extent that you believe them, you are depriving yourself of possibly valuable information or possibly new developments that are coming along from another source. So after we had parted company from the institutes, I heard about a guy up in Los Angeles who had something totally different to offer that might have helped our son, but it was pretty late in the game by then. Our son was past the age when that would have been most helpful. So that was the cost of that sort of thing.
So, tell us some more about the Institute and the fellow behind it. You describe him pretty good in the book, and meeting him for the first time. I forget his name. I think the last name was Doman?
Dolman, yes. He's quite elderly now. I think he's pretty much handed over the control of that outfit to his son and his daughter. It's sort of a family organization.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a very charismatic, larger-than-life figure. And he could stand up and he would give these lectures to an amphitheater full of parents who had traveled from all over the world. We had people there from just about every country who came twice a year to get information. And he would inspire us. He really knew how to. He was a good orator, and that's really what fired people up to go back and deal with skeptics and so forth back at home.
And how, reading the book, you have an incredible grasp of the conversations and the events as they happened. Did you start writing the book as soon as he was born, or kept a journal?
I was journaling. I had no anticipation that this would ever be published as a book. I was writing for my own benefit because I started right at the beginning because I was just so confused. You have a person in your family with some strange, unexplained problem, and you take him to the doctors, and the doctors aren't helping you. That's confusing. At least it was confusing for me. I perhaps expected more from the doctors than was reasonable. But be that as it may, yes, I was writing notes, I was journaling, and I also, throughout my career, I've been a terrific note taker. I learned that in college. So in a lecture, I took splendid notes. If he cleared his throat, I would I would write just kidding. But I got everything down. So when the time came to actually put this together into a book, there's no question about relying on memory. I had the facts.
The name of the book is What About the Boy? A Father's Pledge to His Disabled Son by Stephen Gallup. It is available at Amazon, and I imagine most of the stores that you purchase books in. I also am a fellow note taker. I am constantly driving my wife nuts, I am sure, though she's never mentioned it, with all the little snippets of paper and notebooks laying around the house that I write in constantly. I'll hear something on the radio and I'll just write it down. And
why not?
Yeah,
forget it otherwise.
I have such a bad myself. I have such a bad long-term memory. It's it's pitiful. If I don't write it down, I don't remember it. It goes in one ear and out the other. That's why it's.
I just will not have the experience at all if you don't have access to it later.
Yes. How old is Joseph now?
He just turned 27.
And how is he doing mentally and physically?
Well, Joseph does not talk. He did speak somewhat when he was younger, and I think possibly he made a decision at some point, both with speech and with other things, that he had gone as far as he wanted to go, because he actually regressed a little bit. But at this point, he does not live at home, but he does not live independently either. He's in a residential situation with about 3 or 4 other guys his age who also are disabled, and there's a staff there. There's a nurse in charge. Mm-hmm. He spends his days at a sheltered environment where he has little tasks he can take care of. Keeps him engaged. Rides a bus to and from, and I bring him home at least one weekend a month to be with the family.
That sounds like an excellent situation. I mean, he's I would guess sort of out on his own, functioning as much of an adult in the world as he can. Does he have a job? Does he do work, or is that completely out of the question?
It's not constructive employment. I mean, if they want him to shred some papers, he can do that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But it's not actually a job. He has in the past picked up trash in the park and that kind of thing.
What are his talents? What are his strengths?
Well, it's hard to say. He's really he's afflicted by sensory problems. You know, one thing Glenn Doman at the Institute talked about that I think was absolutely right was people who have these kinds of developmental problems. The problem acts as sort of a barrier, and the barrier could be for input. In other words, it obstructs your perception of the world. Either through any of the channels like vision or hearing or touch, and it can also interfere with output such as mobility and speech. And I think he's affected in all aspects, although we certainly overcame his mobility issues. That was our biggest triumph. But he has trouble processing information, so that he tends to persevere with certain activities that, well, for someone who knows what autism is, they'd call it stimming, self-stimulation. He might hold a piece of paper by the corner and feel the weight of it fall to one side of his hand and then kind of flip it so it goes to the other side. And there's something about the way the weight transfers that means something to him. So he can get lost in doing that.
It actually sounds pretty cerebral.
Well, who knows? I really would give a lot to get inside his head and understand what he's experiencing.
Has anybody, and you obviously know more about this than I do, has anybody ever come up with anything to get inside of his head, to see what he's thinking, see how he's thinking, how he processes the world around him?
Well, there are kinds of brain scans that can be done,
mm-hmm.
Which can show what parts of the brain are more active than others, and that's something I've considered doing. I haven't yet because I question whether or not the information would justify at this point, you know, the trouble and the expense. I just don't know. I mean, perhaps you could accomplish just as much via intuition, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't really know. I mean, there's a lot I don't know about this, and I'm still pursuing it. I had a conversation with his doctor about it yesterday about what is sensible to do at this point in terms of pursuing an understanding.
On the screen for the folks on the video side for a little while here, I have had a photograph of the baby Joseph when he was younger in his anti-rolling over harness. And Judy came up with that, didn't she?
She did. We had read about something. Well, first of all, he was determined to lie on his back all the time
mm-hmm.
when he was an infant. And if you put him on his tummy, he would flip over. And we had read that kids don't learn anything about mobility when they're lying on their back. If you wanted to progress to crawling and to everything that comes after crawling, you've got to get him on his tummy. And so the only way to do that and to keep him there is they said there was an anti-roll device. Well, we didn't know what an anti-roll device was until we got to the institutes, and we had an appointment several months off in the future. So she invented her own, which basically amounted to a part of a styrofoam swim ring, which she cut, and she sewed it into a sort of a tube or a sleeve that was sewed onto the back of a vest that he wore. And he could not roll over when he had that on. He hated it. He fussed and complained, but the first thing you know, he's adapting to life on his hands and knees, and it took a long time, but actually he began crawling.
Is this a standard device that they use?
I don't know if anyone outside the institutes does that. Their own device was a little bit different. They had something made out of PVC pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So ours was a different design, which probably was even better because it didn't go out as far from his body. It was easier to get through doorways without getting stuck.
How old was he when he finally learned to crawl?
I guess he was about 20, 22 months, something like that. And of course, that was for very short distances, and then we worked on escalating to larger and greater, longer distances until he was doing quite a lot of crawling on his hands and knees.
Do you have any regrets as far as anything that you did or didn't do in helping him?
Well, I kind of see that our time at the Institutes as being in two halves. The first half was we were getting him mobile, getting him to where he could walk. And that took him until he was 39 months old. And then we took a little break, and then we came back, and the focus changed to getting him to do other things, including talking. And the second phase was not productive. We kept telling ourselves it was, but it wasn't. And I think, in retrospect, we might have left the Institutes at that point without losing too much, and done something else, such as there's something called applied behavior analysis, which was very much in vogue at the time, although we hadn't heard about it because we were so much focused on what we were doing.
Right.
That might have helped. Everything I did, everything I heard about that seemed at all likely to be any good, I did it. So I don't have the regret of passing up something. And I recommend that. I really do think if there's a reason, I don't believe in leaving stones unturned, in other words.
Exploring all the possibilities.
Yes, and we did explore, and we made some wrong turns. We wasted a good deal of money, but at least I'm not kicking myself for passing up something that might have worked.
Now, I saw in the book that, and you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to. It might be a sensitive subject. That you started going back to church with your wife.
Well, yes, we did. You're the first person who has asked about that. I think it's such a sensitive subject. People don't want to.
Well, we're a Christian show, so.
Okay. Well, Scripture has a lot to say about how to bear up when the going gets tough. And there are various responses. One response is to say, like the Old Testament prophet, how does it go? Although all about me may be turned into destruction and despair, yet I will rejoice in my God. In other words, laying down the burden and the baggage that we carry. But there are other ways of looking at Scripture, in which Scripture is pretty explicit about saying that bring your requests to God, and your the prayer of a righteous man avails much, and ask and you shall receive. We were prompted to do this by my wife's sister, who kept saying, you shouldn't have this much trouble getting your son to where he needs to be. I think you're just going about this wrong. Why don't you ask God to help you? So actually, there's a part later on in the book where we trade what could be called one cult for another. We're under the sway of these people who are saying that all these problems are insignificant and can all be conquered through prayer. And that's not very realistic either, we discovered.
So I'm trying to what I'm trying to get at is, and this is more for the audience, as I think as well for you too, that I feel when I was reading the book, it was sort of a paradigm shift in my mind that occurred once I got into the book and became involved with your family, because the book is written in such a way you really become involved. I think one of the true talents that you have when you wrote that book is you give just enough information so that the person's imagination can fill in the gaps in what you're conveying. In other words, you can transpose your own feelings into your narrative. Is that how you intended the book to be?
I'm glad to hear you say that. Yes, there's a big question as to how much to tell in terms of, you don't want to spell everything out. You want to leave some room for people to bring their own perspective in. So if you feel that way, then I'm very glad.
Yes, I think other readers, if people read this book, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It'll be painful in some parts, but the rewards of reading it, I think, are. To me, it's your book is a story of triumph, of overcoming life's difficulties, and doing and making decisions that you feel are correct. Did you, when you were raising Joseph and you were going through all the problems, did you ever waffle or vacillate over the decisions you were making?
I don't recall waffling or vacillating, unless we were in doubt as to what to do. We were. Our attitude was problems were not to be endured, but they were to be solved, and we were determined to solve them if we possibly could. Now, that's not necessarily always the wisest attitude to have. Life does bring difficulties to us all. There is no shortage of adversity, and anybody who's has no serious problems right now, I don't mean to bring you down, but there's, troubles on the way. It's probably it's on the off-ramp from the freeway right now. We all run into these things. Maybe it's not a disabled child, but there's something. And not all of these problems have easy or solutions or any solutions at all. So the question is, what do you do? And our story, I think, is about pursuing a difficult objective in the absence of a very clear guideposts, and just doing the best we could with what we had.
One aspect of the book that I wanted to bring up is your employment and how they treated you, how they approached the situation, because everybody obviously has a job and they go to work, and when an issue like this comes up, and it's obviously a life-changing issue, and your whole existence changes at that instant. What was your experience like with your employer? How receptive were they? And do you think that is the norm in the workplace? Because obviously a lot of other parents that are going through the same thing that you did.
I was lucky. I think my employers were very decent about it. Before my son was born, I was all my life I've been a technical writer, and I was involved with writing proposals for launching spacecraft or satellites into orbit. And this was a very stressful type of job. I was working long hours, 12 hours a day was quite normal, and weekends as well. And then this came along, and I was going to have to be involved not only with taking my son to doctors and to places around the country, but working at home. And I started coming home during my lunch hour to help with the therapy, and I needed to come home as soon as possible in the evening. And my boss asked me at one point, well, when you're here, what happens at home? And I said, well, my wife needs to get an extra volunteer to fill in for me. And my boss says, well, do what you got to do. And somehow I found myself not working a lot, long hours so much anymore. And it so happens that one of my coworkers got a promotion and I didn't, but I kept my job, and I was still respected there. And that continued throughout this experience. So it may have held back my career path, but on the other hand, it's a choice I would gladly make. And so again, I've been lucky, but somebody else at another line of work may not be. I think there's some situations where that would not be tolerated.
That is, personally, I think that is really too bad that an employer wouldn't go the extra distance for an employee that has that type of a situation in their lives. I mean, for me, it's a foreign experience.
Well, I was a salaried employee. We were professionals. If I think someone maybe at a lower rung on the ladder, maybe the employer doesn't have as much of an investment in the employee,
right?
And might just find it easier to get rid of them and to replace them.
Right. Now, speaking of your employment, and this is in the book, around this time that the stress started to escalate was right around the time of the Challenger disaster, wasn't it?
Well, yes. Gosh,
that had to have affected you a lot.
The Challenger disaster was, I think, in the spring of '86. My son was born in '85. Am I right? I think it was '80.
I believe so.
My son would have been about 1 year old when that happened. My employer was providing a big part for it was an upper stage for the shuttle that was supposed to be launched from the cargo bay of the space shuttle to carry a satellite higher into orbit. And because of the shuttle disaster, that whole thing was canceled. And tons of people were either out of work or were reassigned to do something else.
That had to have added a lot of stress. How did you how did you handle the stress? Do you think you handled the stress okay? I mean, were there any physical aspects of the stress that popped up when all this was going on?
I think I've handled stress reasonably well, although I may have internalized it. I think I did reasonably well. Other people might say otherwise. I tend to hunker down under stress and to just put my nose to the grindstone and not. There aren't a lot of histrionics on my part. That's just my way. Stoic, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
My wife, over time, I think the stress affected her in that she became very ill. She got cancer.
Oh.
And I mean, you can't always say that. Cancer supposedly has a genetic basis. But I think that there's a case to be made for stress or lifestyle affecting your susceptibility. And I personally believe that the stress caused her to be sick.
Yes, stress, unrelenting stress can do that. That is something that I am relatively familiar with in my life, having unrelenting stress of a family member that causes issues. I wanted to ask you one last question before we go, and that would be, what advice would you give other parents that find themselves in the same situation? You're talking to other parents now, and they have just discovered that there's a problem with their child. What would you say to these new parents? I mean, obviously they're young people, and they probably didn't consider that the child may be disabled. What would you say to them? And take as long as you want to. I mean, Just tell them what you think, what's your best advice for them.
Sure. I want to mention again that the book I wrote is not intended to be instructional.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a how-to. It's a memoir. It's a story. But having said that, sure, I could not have lived through this experience without drawing some conclusions. And the first one is that a child who is disabled, first and foremost, is still a child. Now, I know that sounds like a bromide, but like other well-worn bits of, quote, good advice, such as eat well, get enough sleep, and so on, it sounds familiar for a reason. And I know from experience, it's all too easy to forget the obvious stuff. All kids need to be treated as kids. What I'm recommending comes most easily if you're dealing with an apple-cheeked youngster who says cute things and gives you lots of great feedback. But on the other hand, a child with problems that make him less than cuddly or responsive, that child may inspire enthusiasm on your part for finding professional help, and that's great. However, he also desperately needs to be told right now, repeatedly, in every way, that he's loved and cherished. And kids who give you no eye contact or who are rigid or combative, they need this reassurance at least as much as anyone else. There's a part in my book where Joseph, that's my son, gave me the feedback to make me realize that I'd been too focused on trying to solve a problem for him and not remembering to be a daddy. That's one tip. Another one would be trust your doctor, but be prepared to think for yourself. We, as we've been saying, we found other doctors who confirmed what we knew, that our son had significant problems. But this was after his pediatrician and others had been telling us, they said, all parents worry. Of course you're worried. Yeah, you're going to keep on worrying until he grows up and starts his first job and so forth. You just got to control it. Don't worry too much. Well, I agree that worry itself is not helpful. But the best remedy for worry is knowing that the potential areas of concern have either been ruled out or adequately addressed. So if your doctor is not not taking your problem seriously, you need to consider somebody else, I think. Mm-hmm. Another important tip would be don't let your heart betray your mind. And I arrived at that conclusion gradually over a period of years. You see, Judy and I attempted a great many different ways to help our son improve. Some of those interventions made more sense than others. Some definitely helped more than others. But, if you wanted to believe in it, just about anything that was presented could make sense. Do you see where I'm going with this? Mm-hmm. Shakespeare, what did he say? The wish is father to the thought, which means, you want something to be true, so you're going to justify whatever you hear that reinforces that. So
yeah, I think we all know people like that. I know a lot of people like that justify what they think mm-hmm. should be true, grasping at straws, essentially. Yeah, sure. We look for things that reinforce our wishes. Well, seeing our son get better was the most important thing in the world to us. Yeah.
So if someone came along and said confidently that he was the one who knew how to solve the problem, in a case like that, there's a strong temptation to trust him. And we trusted some people who essentially were crooks. Now, that's not to say, please listen, that's not to say that all alternative providers are crooks. They aren't. But when you decide to put your faith in somebody because you want to believe in what he says, when deep down your mind is raising flags, that's not going to do you any good.
So you need to listen to your mind as well as your heart, is what you're saying.
Indeed. That's the point, yes, sir.
Yes. Well, Steve, I appreciate you coming on the show. I think this was a very, very rewarding interview, and I think when this gets up on YouTube and more people watch it, I think that it will help a lot of people, and I think that's important. And I wanted to say that as I was reading your book, something, and I'm not sure what it is yet, something, some kind of a circuit or a switch clicked in my mind. And I guess my way of thinking or my emotions changed just a little bit while I was reading the book. And I can't put my finger on it yet, on what it is. But that's something that I'm working on right now. I mean, I'm not used to this type of an emotional roller coaster when I read a memoir or an autobiography. Maybe it's just because I'm just a very I just feel other people's pain so much. But I really appreciate you writing the book, sir.
Well, it's very gratifying to hear you say that. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you were here, I'd give you a big hug.
Well, maybe I should go and get that hug.
We live in southeastern Michigan. You can come at any time. You've got the phone number. I'll give you the address.
Okay.
You can come on over for a barbecue and hang out for a while.
That would be great.
Yes. Again, the name of the book is, let me call it up here so I get it exactly right. The name of the book is What About the Boy? A Father's Pledge to His Disabled Son by Stephen Gallup. Steve, I appreciate you coming on, and you have my highest congratulations and my deepest respect.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to talk about this.
Yes. Thank you for coming on, and I will send you an email when the interview is up on YouTube.
Great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was our guest, Mr. Stephen Gallup. Let me turn the volume up here so that you can hear me. And there we go. When the telephone system is on, the volume gets all messed up on the soundboard, so I have to make some adjustments. That was Stephen Gallup. He is in California. And the book is, in my opinion, more than worthy of reading. You will, I believe that this book will shift the paradigm of how you think, as well as it did for me. It is, for me, it was a very spiritual experience, and I'm just glad I read the book, and you should too. My name is Bill Xam. We will be on again Friday night with a minister. We'll be sending out emails and putting notices up on the website shortly. Thank you for stopping by, and until the next time, bye-bye.